Well, as Australia's population grows, more road users will eventually clog our roads. It's exacerbated by the ever-increasing deliveries of parcels. It does mean that Australia needs an overhaul of its traffic management systems, and Paris is a prime example of how to do it. In the lead up to the 2024 Olympic Games, Paris is prioritising micro-mobility vehicles and pedestrians at intersections and reducing parking spaces in its cities. The big question now is, do our politicians have the nerve to go the same way?
Paris, famous for its food and its fashion, is also one of the most congested cities in the world. So bad is the traffic that drastic changes have been forced upon it. The speed limit has been dropped to 30 kilometres an hour to aid safety for the 11.1 million residents of the Greater Paris region. The iconic city has been forced to embrace new ways of moving around, of delivering things. The extreme example of Paris highlights the problem of traffic congestion for last kilometre delivery all around the world, including Australia. It's a global logistics problem to be solved, to help more than $650 billion of parcels to be shipped more efficiently around the world each year. Australia alone spent a record $50 billion online in 2020, a jump of nearly 60% on the previous 12 months. And every one of those parcels has to be delivered in a timely manner. But here's the conundrum. The more we online shop for groceries, for takeout food, for clothing, the more our cities will face rising congestion.
I need to focus more on pulling together that focus on cities so that we're focusing on people. And so that means getting that array of strategies in place. So whether it's net zero, integrated transport land use, or vision zero to make sure that we have safe places for people is a really key challenge that we're facing. And as populations grow, cities expand, how do you balance all those competing needs?
The answer, according to professional services firm WSP Australia, is an increasing use of micro-mobility, more bikes, electric scooters, even smaller delivery vans. But that alone will not be enough.
We're championing the use of greater, more safe-moving infrastructure, slower speeds, for example, policy leadership, making it easier to pick up and drop off goods, testing and scaling opportunities, innovating with business to see what works and then scaling it up. And then also looking at things like micro-logistics hubs. So there's a whole bunch of things in there which could make a real difference tomorrow.
So how will micro-mobility help our cities move better and reduce congestion in an ever-crowded world?
We might start by defining what it isn't. And so when we talk about micro-mobility, we're not talking about cars, vans or trucks. Rather, we're talking about low-profile, lightweight vehicles. So think bikes, e-bikes, scooters and cargo bikes.
But for micro-mobility to work, cities need infrastructure to support it. Government has to come on board.
So I think in many ways Australia lags when you look at the use of micromobility in Australia, both for delivery but also for moving people. We don't do as well as some of our global counterparts, particularly when you contrast to cities like Paris, where they've invested in hundreds of kilometres of dedicated bike lanes, and the use of bicycles both to get around and deliver things is just part of the DNA of the city.
Paris is known as one of the most congested cities in the world and is making some drastic changes to tackle that. The speed limit has been dropped to 30 kilometres an hour, making it easier and safer for people to pick up and drop off orders in the busy streets of Paris.
So I think cities like Paris have proven what it can look like when you invest in micromobility infrastructure and policy. And so you just have to look around the streets and you can see Parisians cycling around on e-bikes, on e-scooters, you can see cargo bikes. And that's because they've dedicated infrastructure in the city to provide safety for cyclists and for pedestrians, and they've backed it up with long-term policy reform, such as the decision to remove cars transiting through Paris. So in the next 2 years, they're going to basically ban cars transiting through the centre of Paris. That'll take 50% of cars off the road, and then they can reuse that space again for infrastructure, for cycling, for living, for parks, and really making the city a nicer place to live.
The challenge for politicians and policymakers to understand is that the demand for delivery will only continue to grow. Changes are needed to prevent our cities from clogging up.
E-commerce will continue to grow, so there's no doubting that. There's also no doubting that that will result in more demand for on-demand delivery, for last-mile delivery. What we're not certain of is how we can respond to that. And so if we continue to respond with cars and vans and trucks, it's not going to be good for cities.